Thank you so much. So, we'll just go ahead and start off with if you want to give yourself a brief introduction, a little bit about your background, how you got into politics, and maybe why you're running for reelection.
I'm Senator Dave Marsden. I've been in the state Senate for 14 years. 4 years before that, I was in the House of Delegates and spent my career here in Fairfax County, working for 30 years for our juvenile court as a juvenile probation officer, group home director for kids with extremely difficult family situations, and then for 17 years, superintendent of our local juvenile detention center. Following that, I worked uh, in Richmond as the appointee of Governor Gilmore and Governor Warner as chief deputy and acting director of Virginia's Department of Juvenile Justice, uh, and which was a 2,700 person agency doing juvenile corrections throughout the state. Had about 1,250 kids in corrections when I got there, and then running our 31 court service units that did probation. And left there in 2002, and for the last 20 some years have been working in juvenile justice consulting, doing a lot of violence prevention work. I was technical assistance director for President Obama's National Forum on Youth Violence Prevention and headed up a number of other um, uh, forays into helping local jurisdictions with their facility operations and with certain criminal justice uh, planning activities to reduce youth violence and gang activity. And so in the state Senate, I serve on the Finance Committee. I'm the subcommittee chairman of Economic Development and Natural Resources. I chair the Transportation Committee, and I am on Agriculture and Natural Resources, Rules and Commerce and Labor, where I serve on the subcommittee involving energy. And I live here in Burke, Virginia. I have 3 grown sons and live here with my wife, Julia.
Perfect. Nice to meet you. I'm also from Burke, so that's really nice. So we're just going to go over a few main topics that we feel would interest college students here at the university. One being the economy and funding for university as it pertains to college students. So, despite being the largest university in Virginia, George Mason receives one of the least amounts of state funding compared to other public universities in Virginia. So, how do you plan to ensure adequate funding for George Mason University? And this can include things, important services such as scholarships, grants, and resources for our research and development of the university as a whole.
Okay. Quite simply, if you go back to the 1980s, I guess, back then the state used to pay for about 2/3 of college tuition, and students and that over the years, and now it's the exact opposite, is that parents and students pay for 2/3 of the cost of college, and the state only pays 1/3. And this was brought about largely because of the decision when Jim Gilmore was running for governor to eliminate the car tax. That was eventually capped at $1 billion, and it took a serious chunk out of education funding. And then we had a 20-year period of time where there was a reluctance to ever raise taxes. A different political party was in charge, and the reluctance to raise taxes exacerbated the problem of tuition, of lowering tuition for students. And we've been making progress on that, but we still have a long way to go. And to be quite honest with you, George Mason was a newer participant in the competition for the funding pool. And back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, many of the legislators were graduates of the University of Virginia, VMI, Virginia Tech, Mary Washington, you name it, the state schools. And so the preference tended to be advantaged to to those legacy schools who had been there longer and had greater political influence.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So you kind of touched on it a little bit. My next question was about tuition. And so for college students, tuition costs continue to rise. We were just wondering what policies you would support to make higher education not only more affordable, but accessible. And then also if you support anything regarding decreasing the burden of student loans.
I do, and I think the activity that the federal government's been engaged in through this administration and President Biden has run into some legal hurdles. But the idea of forgiving a certain percentage of student debt is critical because we need young people to be able to take full advantage of their employment and take full advantage of the economy by being able to purchase a car, purchase a house, begin to have those things in place to be able to have children and plan for the future of their family. It is a critical part of what we need to do. Without getting too partisan, we've only had 2 years of Democratic control of the state Senate and the House of Delegates and the governorship, all three at the same time for only 2 years in the last, say, 25 years or so. And the reluctance and the anti-tax positions of my friends on the other side of the aisle has made it difficult, to do this. And one of the things that we need to do is to level the playing fields for all of our colleges and universities and deal with some of the historic imbalances. Just 2 years ago, I was part of getting $7 million to James Madison University, who's another disadvantaged facility in terms of coming up with what they needed for their base or core funding that they have. And I appreciate and we have a system in Virginia in higher ed where we don't try to control it at the statewide level like North Carolina and Maryland do. They have a chancellor of higher education, and everybody kind of answers to is sort of under that umbrella. Here we give greater independence to our state colleges and universities, and that has led to different policies. But one thing I appreciate is some of the schools having a blind admissions policy saying, if you're admitted here, we're going to come up with the money to have you succeed. If you have to pay all of the tuition and fees, that's fine. If you can only pay 5%, that's fine too. But we'll come up with it. And I think that's been a really good plan. And sometimes we need to ask our colleges and universities to cut back a little bit on the requests for new buildings, because we're in an era now of being able to do distance learning and don't need quite the number of perhaps classrooms and buildings that we've needed in the past, which those savings could be passed on to the reduction of tuition.
Thank you. And on a similar note, housing costs in the Fairfax area, Fairfax City, are also continuing to rise and are unattainable for many young adults. How do you plan to address this concern?
Well, one of the things I think we're continuing to look at, and this will again depend on the upcoming election tomorrow and in 2 years from now. I got $75 million in my role in economic development and natural resources in the Senate to get $75 million into the Housing Trust Fund, which is a fund to use to encourage the creation of lower cost housing for people. It's a huge need throughout the Commonwealth. And what we're seeing is people leaving Fairfax County predominantly because of the inability to find housing. Even rental housing can be extremely expensive. And what we need to do is to continue to support transit-oriented development, especially along our Silver Line, which was created for that purpose, for high-density development. And I'm working on a proposal now to create a convention center, hotels, entertainment district, and venue for large concerts, which none of those things we have the capacity for in Fairfax County, and to create those jobs and the high density housing around there, and also to include perhaps a casino. Because we are losing a vast amount of our commercial real estate revenue here in the state, because we have a lot of vacant office building space, primarily due to what happened after COVID or during COVID. And since then, is that people are making different decisions about where they work. And so many people are working for home that companies are able to downsize the amount of office space that they need. And so we're coming up with a very different time in Fairfax County, where we always assumed our proximity to the district and our office building capacity would be the strength of our economy, and we're finding that that's being decreased, and we need to come up with new ways of creating the revenue to do many things around education and housing for our citizens, because we want people to be able to get to work and to work where, or to live where they work, and not have to live an hour away just to afford a house.
So it seems that you're the chair of transportation in the Senate, and so you would say that transportation, jobs, and all these things are tied to housing. If I'm hearing you
Very
correctly.
much so. It is, all of these things are very much tied together. You're seeing in cities around the country the frustration of young people showing up in carjackings. Uh, Transportation is one of the great equalizers in life, the ability to get around and to go places. For many of us, thinking about going someplace is never a big consideration. You just get in your car and you go. For many young people, especially with limited transit options here in the District of Columbia, we're not like New York City. Kids get very frustrated that they can't go to where they want to go. And I would like to see us develop where um, young people, college age and younger, would be able to use our bus system without charge. They don't use it a great deal now, and the ability to move around would also perhaps reduce some of the crime we're seeing with this theft of cars.
Good to know. Thank you so much. So the next topic I wanted to go into is the environment. How do you plan to address environmental issues, including climate change and sustainability in our district?
I was the chief co-patron, along with the bill's primary author, Jennifer McClellan, who's now a congressman out of the Richmond area. We were the chief co-patrons of what's called the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which has us as being carbon neutral in the Dominion power service area by 2045, and in the Appalachian Power Company service area by 2050. Uh, what this calls for is uh, efficiencies in the delivery of power, and it also calls on us to make decisions that, as I anticipate that I may be chair of what's called the Commerce and Labor Committee, which will have dominion over our energy policy decisions. And what I want to do after this next session is pull together a 2 to 3 day symposium to cover a number of different areas around the climate. I've always been, a League of Conservation Voters climate champion. And it's been an important part of what I have done and what I am currently doing. And I want to pull together just how much progress we've made. We need to establish whether we need to have a statewide energy plan in terms of where to locate wind turbines and solar facilities. As you may know, right now, Dominion Energy is building 176 of the biggest windmills, wind turbines you can imagine off the Virginia Capes, which is off the eastern shore of Virginia, about 26 miles. I've been out to see the first two prototypes. They're just amazing. And it will provide clean energy for 900,000 homes here in the Commonwealth when it's completed in 2026. But that's just only part. We have a number of problems. Um, our school funding formula in Virginia is tied to a community, or excuse me, a jurisdiction's wealth. If you are a poor jurisdiction, you are likely to get 75% of your school funding from the state, and you are only responsible for 25% of it. And these are conservative, red districts, if you will, leaning heavily Republican. And if they are to invest in solar power, it makes them wealthier, and it affects the amount of school money they get. In other words, they get less money for schools if they get wealthier. And many of them don't believe in climate change, and they think it's something they shouldn't have to care about. And we're what's called a Dillon Rule state. And as a Dillon Rule state, localities can't do anything unless the General Assembly gives them authority to do so. And what I may want to be sponsoring, not this year, but in the following year, is a plan to create a statewide plan that will allow the state to have final decisions on where these facilities go, because many jurisdictions just don't want them. They don't want to look at them. They don't want their farmland taken up with them, and it creates a number of problems. So what I would do is have the state make those determinations, or perhaps give a goal to each locality saying, hey, we need 1,200 acres. You decide where to put it, but we need 1,200 acres of solar. And we need to get serious about this. We also have to examine whether we can get to by 2035, only selling new vehicles that are fully electric, fully EV. And I'm not sure we can do that from the standpoint of, I do not know that the United States has enough access to the rare metals necessary to create the batteries that would make that a reality. What we may need to look at is an alternative, which is going with a fleet of selling plug-in hybrids. That solves about 86% of our problem, because 86% of trips are under 50 miles a day, which a plug-in hybrid can do without using gasoline. But we have to be serious about the climate and its effect on our country, its effect on the world, and America has to take the lead there. And if I do chair Commerce and Labor, I hope to be a major part of leading that effort to get Virginia to be a model for the rest of the country. And already with our windmills off the Virginia Capes, we're going to take a giant leap toward becoming one of the greenest states in America.
Thank you so much. The next topic that I kind of wanted to go into is the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion on campuses and in schools. DEI is a thing that's kind of floating around right now. I don't know if you're familiar, but back in September, I believe it was, the Heritage Foundation published a report essentially criticizing DEI programs at our university. And it said that GMU is essentially employing an excessive amount of staff and budget, and all of this is meant to promote what they call radical ideologies. So, and then our university president ended up pushing back on those claims. And so my question for you is, how do you view the importance of these programs, given that GMU is the largest and also most diverse public research institution in the state of Virginia?
Well, it certainly is an important issue to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to attend our state colleges and universities, and at a reasonable cost. And the efforts we've put into diversity and equity and inclusion, I think, are extremely important. Hopefully it's something that we can come up with, very natural ways of doing it. It's like what happened with Thomas Jefferson High School. We shifted from an emphasis on this test to widening the field of people eligible to enter based on their grades and references and what have you. We had intermediate schools that have never had a kid go to Jefferson, because families that had the means would have kids preparing for the test to get into Jefferson in the second grade, and sometimes in a foreign country, knowing that they could send the child to Fairfax County when he was of high school age and live with an aunt or uncle, and would ace the test and be able to get into Jefferson. But it's the same with our colleges and universities. We've had, an historic reputation in this country for not having equal opportunity education for elementary and high school kids based on the wealth and the abilities of localities to educate their young people, which was a hurdle to get folks into our flagship colleges and universities. And so we have to be able to look at kids holistically and determine who can succeed here, not who has always done the best they can do at the high school level, but who can achieve here at this university, and to make sure that university, represents the blend of students of different religious, ethnic, racial backgrounds that we have here in Virginia, because here can set an example to the rest of the state, the country, and the world, that people from all over with significant differences in the way they look and the cultures that they come from can all work together in a democracy to for the betterment of all of us. And right now, our democracy is under extreme stress from the folks who are still denying the election of President Biden, who are seem to be fascinated by autocratic leaders as opposed to the democratic leaders that we have. It's difficult up on Capitol Hill for Republicans and Democrats to even sit down with each other. They don't know each other anymore. Everybody leaves town every time they can. So we don't have our delegates, our congressmen and our senators hanging around and living in Washington, D.C. so they can get to know their counterparts at PTA meetings and Little League games and birthday parties for children and any other social events that you get involved in the community that you live in, because it has become almost evil somehow or another to live and become part of the Washington metropolitan area, because somehow or another that's bad for your district back home. And I don't believe in that. I think politics is a relationship business, and we need people to get to know each other, get along, and be able to talk and understand each other. And that is a huge problem, and it keeps us from only caring about the people we represent and not the nation as a whole.
And so, just to clarify for any viewers who may not be familiar, I know Thomas Jefferson High School is in Fairfax County Public Schools, and it's a more selective public high school. You take a test to get in, and I assume it's to get into the more rigorous curriculum. And so, just so for anybody who's not aware, or from the area. And so I also take that you are in support of the DEI programs that I guess we have here at George Mason University. And just to follow up with that, do you support any other policies aimed to protect people of color on college campuses, or LGBTQ plus people, students in schools at the university
Mm-hmm.
level, or in the community more broadly?
Yeah. Uh, in terms of policies, I'm familiar with some of the administrative efforts at dealing with this, but I'm hoping that students also will resist the idea of only socializing and relating to those who are of similar backgrounds, races, colors, creeds, religions, whatever. And that we all get to know each other by joining organizations that aren't just aren't about people who are like us. And we need to do our work. I think students need to do their work in terms of not self-segregating each other, but getting involved and establishing friendships and relationships through clubs and activities that put them in touch with people who are from different backgrounds than they are. And so there's an obligation here for students as well, not just administrators, to make sure that everybody's feeling welcome, that everybody, feels safe on college campuses, and that they can put up with some speech that they may not like, because that's part of life, and you need to sit and listen to people who disagree with you, even if you find it sometimes offensive. There are some lines that should never be crossed, in terms of speech. But at the same time, we need to develop a little bit of tolerance with that, and making sure that when we hear others, that they are willing to hear us as well. And that's how America works the best, is when we listen to each other.
Absolutely. That's actually a perfect segue into my next topic, which has to do with campus safety and the overall atmosphere on campus. So, in the wake of the ongoing developments in Israel and Palestine, the US has seen an uptick in anti Semitism and in Islamophobia. And I know you are a state senator, usually dealing with Virginia matters specific to your district and not as much with foreign policy. However, these are topics that lay heavy on the minds of many of your constituents. Just here at James
Mhm.
Mason University, we had protests, heated conversations, and this growing need for religious and ethnic support groups to help people cope with what's going on. So, how do
Mhm.
you propose we navigate campus safety, hateful acts, and the overall well being of students in our district and people in
Well,
general?
I think student leadership, like what you're doing here today. This is a student leadership thing that you're doing, and the administration of our colleges and universities, need to lead the discourse and set the example for getting out and discussing these issues um, in calm and neutral fashions, if you will. I think we can support our long-term ally Israel, based on the horrific thing that happened to them on October 7th, and the slaughter of innocent people, while at the same time making sure that our government is doing the best it can to encourage Israel to protect the lives of innocent Gazan citizens, um, and to make sure that are an absolute minimum, and I think it is our right and our responsibility to demand that of everyone here. But we are dealing with a government in Gaza that is a terrorist organization, and it needs to be dealt with. But I am hoping that certainly Israel can do a better job of ensuring the safety of the innocent people in Gaza who are going through a horrific uh, existence because of this conflict. Uh, you know, War is a terrible thing, and we've always here in America, seen it from a distance. World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. It's always been somebody else's. The place where other people live, not where we live. And we need to get our heads around the idea that we can't let those kinds of things happen here, and the only way to do that is to not take up sides and hurl insults at each other and and accusations, but to sit down and talk, and to make sure that someone of a different faith, of a different culture, is feeling um, that all of us need to share the responsibility for doing the right thing here, as difficult as that may be. And this is as difficult a political, humanitarian situation as I could have ever imagined. What's going on right now, and the only way to deal with this appropriately is to stay calm, stay rational, reach out to others to talk about the problem, and listen more than you talk, and hopefully we can get through this horrific problem, and I'm hoping can return to a two-state solution in Israel and the Middle East, to provide Palestinians with a home of their own that is under their control. But it's going to be a very, very difficult path to get there. But the only way we can do that is to stay calm and rational, keep our emotions out of it, keep our ears open, and make sure we listen to the concerns of everyone.
Thank you. And as we discuss campus safety, I want to turn us to another threat kind of on the minds of many GMU students here. Gun violence is now the leading cause of death for children and adolescents in the US. What policies would you support to address the rise in gun violence in our communities?
The biggest problem we are having in the Commonwealth uh, outside of the violence itself is the cause of that violence. And when I was in the House of Delegates in 2009, there was a bill that came up that was finally passed in the House and brought to the Senate in my first year in the state Senate. Uh, what it did was say in an automobile, you no longer had to have a concealed weapons permit to have a gun in your car. Uh, all you had to do was have it locked. And it came to the Senate. I voted against that because I did not want people who didn't have concealed weapons permits to have guns in their car, even if they were locked. And Governor McDonnell amended that bill in 2010 and made it so that you didn't even have to have the gun locked. All you had to do was have it secured, which means in the door slot by the driver or shoved down between the driver's seat and the center console with the handle showing. Last year, we had 714 guns stolen from Richmond, 1,341 in a 4-year period of time in the Lynchburg area. It's happening in Petersburg, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, even the little town of Gretna, which just has 1,000 people or so, had 5 in 1 year. Kids are going up and down the street. The state police will tell you, just looking for these guns to either sell or to use. And we have created a situation, and I tried to fix it last year. I had a bill that said basically, it's the only thing I thought I could get through a Republican House of Delegates, which we had last year, and that was to make it a traffic offense with a $500 fine if you get caught with a gun in an unlocked car. Because most of the kids will steal guns from unlocked cars. Sometimes they'll break in, but mostly they're from unlocked cars. And people put a gun in their car and they forget that it's there, and then they're shocked when it's stolen. But these guns are getting into the wrong hands. Trust me, I was involved in the criminal justice system, running our Department of Juvenile Justice, and it is a huge problem. I don't think the general public is aware of this, but we have 70 some jurisdictions in Virginia who refuse to enforce the laws that we passed in 2020 and 21, like the red flag law that can take guns away from people who are acting dangerously for a temporary period of time until they've been restored to where people think it's safe for them to have a gun. We had universal background checks come in, and we have jurisdictions who won't enforce laws like that. We have the 1 gun a month law for handguns. You can only buy 1 handgun a month because people were buying batches of them, taking them to other states and selling them at 2.5 times the price because of our lax gun laws. So we put in a lot of these protections, but we have jurisdictions that are not enforcing them. And I think here in the near future, if this continues, we're going to have to penalize those jurisdictions that won't enforce our gun laws by removing some of the state aid that they get for operating local government.
I didn't know that. I wonder to follow up with that. How is that? How can that happen? You know what I mean? If you pass bills that are meant to do something, and 70 districts aren't, how can that be navigated? How is that allowed?
Well, it is a question of how do you stop it? It's up to local law enforcement to determine what they charge and what they don't. A lot of these things are misdemeanors, and they have discretion over misdemeanors. All law enforcement does. When I was a probation officer, I had arrest powers, but if I saw somebody committing a felony, I was obligated to do something. But if I saw somebody doing a misdemeanor, like I found a kid with a joint on him or something, I didn't have to charge him or take him to court. And these jurisdictions are just saying, no, thank you. We're not interested in enforcing these gun laws. And we're going to have to figure this out. But the problem is that we only had power for 2 years, and right now it's divided. There's a Republican House of Delegates, a Republican governor, and they are very much in favor of Second Amendment rights, and are not interested, and will probably roll back our gun laws that we passed, our 7 gun laws that we passed in 2020 and 21. They'll roll them back if we lose the state Senate and don't flip the House of Delegates this year. because there'll be a trifecta with Governor Youngkin having both a Republican House and Senate, and he'll be able to undo many of the laws that we passed in 2020 and 21. So we have to find ways of making it uncomfortable for people to not enforce the laws that we pass.
Thank you. Finally, I just want to turn our attention to voting and elections. So there are many organizations on campus concerned with voter turnout. As you know, we have a precinct right here on campus for students to vote on election day, hoping that that will increase student voter turnout. What are you doing to protect and encourage young voters here in our district?
Well, we've tried just about everything to get young people out to vote, and it's very difficult. Some years better than others, but voting is something that many young people will get around to someday. But right now, they're just too busy, and it's too much of a hassle, and we don't get people out. I had a good friend of mine, though, Shannon Valentine, who was recently our Secretary of Transportation, but she was in the House of Delegates with me, and she was from Lynchburg. Lynchburg is the home of Liberty University, and she was a Democrat. And Liberty University shut school down for the day so that they could bus people to the polls to vote against her. So some universities are heavily engaged. That's a private school, so they can do that. But we need, student leaders to get engaged with making sure that they're turning the vote out in their colleges and universities, because some students, have to vote absentee because they're still registered in their precincts at home, which may be 2-3 hours away, and they don't get home on election day. And others, will vote in the local campus elections. And, I believe, and I would hope that every student would vote in the home, would vote in the precinct where they live when they're not at college. And if they live, at college year round or whatever, then it's fine. Vote there. But we need to have young people voting in the place where their parents vote and in their hometowns. Because that's the way of truly understanding what issues are important to the communities that they have come from.
That's a really good point. My next question was actually having to do with voting in the school district, where their university is, as opposed to their home district. And so I kind of was wanting to ask about many of them who don't consider Virginia State District 35 to be their home, even if they do live here like the full year or most
Mm-hmm.
of the year. But at the same time, it is a lot easier to vote where you live. If you
Mm-hmm.
in November you're living at your university, it's a lot harder to get back home to vote. Some of
Yeah.
them come from out of state, so they end up voting here. But some students just don't see the importance of local elections, local governance in general. How would you convince them that their vote matters on November 7th as it comes to local elections?
By getting more people to listen to programs like this. I've had a proposal that I couldn't quite sell to the current administration, but what I wanted to do, and I spoke with, I've had several meetings with the administration at George Mason and the appropriate school that would handle a program like this in political science, is to have a 3-year program, 1 hour each year, where each student devises their own political engagement course, if you will, by proposing to the professor that, my sophomore year, I'm going to go to the local school board, I'm going to attend this many meetings, and I'm going to speak on these kinds of issues. And I'm going to visit the state electoral board. I'm going to visit Fairfax County's local electoral board and hear how they operate and what their challenges are. And then in my second year, I'm going to do, and you get the idea. And after 3 years, you have a 3-year credit, pass fail in a course like this, and get a and if you do it, and you can document it on your cell phone. All the things that you do is you can get a some kind of recognition on your diploma that you went and did this, because we try to teach civics and government in high school, and a lot of people go to college and never touch the subject again. And we need to find a way of getting people more engaged in the process. So I'm going to revisit that, probably not this year, but next year, to see if I can generate the interest in the course and come up with a couple $100,000 to fund it. And but that's something I'm very, very interested in accomplishing before I retire.
So you might have just answered my next question, which was, what are you doing to connect with Mason students, and how should they in the future connect with legislators like yourself? If you had anything else to add, that was helpful.
Well, is to get involved with the political groups, whether Republican or Democrat, libertarian, whatever, and then have us out to your campus to talk to you, and not just to answer a few questions and what have you, but devote some considerable time to discussions of issues in politics and how things work in a representative democracy. As you may know, we are a republic. We don't have a true democracy. We're not Greece in 500 BC, where everybody went and voted on everything in the town assembly area. It's critical that people understand the system that they're in and the importance of getting engaged in it. And what you're doing here today is a critical part of that. And I thank you for having me as part of your education to educate students here. But I think there really needs to be a requirement to do something around the idea of educating yourself as to how our political system works and how you can impact it, and so that not only your rights, but what the issues are that are important to you and your family and your community.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with you, and I hope this encourages people to go out and vote tomorrow. Just last thing, give yourself, if you want yourself a last pitch to GMU voters who might view this and vote tomorrow on November 7th. If you were elected for another term on day one, what are you working on?
I'm working on a number of things. The one is muffler noise. I've come up with a plan for police to be able to issue a citation for people who they think their mufflers are too loud. And if you don't go in and have it tested, or you get it tested and don't get it and fail and don't get it fixed, you're going to get $250 added to your car registration. I think we're all sick and tired of these loud cars that interrupt sleep and seem to be a mating call for people who want to drive like idiots to play cat and mouse on the interstate highways. It always seems to involve people with loud mufflers. So I'm working on that. I'm also working to consolidate our 24 juvenile detention centers, who are vastly underpopulated. We have a 1.5 student per teacher ratio in these homes, and we need these teachers back in the community, and we can consolidate some of these homes. It costs $500,000 a year to detain a young person temporarily for a delinquent act in Northern Virginia. And the budgets between the Northern Virginia detention home, which serves Alexandria, Arlington, and Falls Church, and the one in Fairfax, on a busy day, we've got 50 kids in 191 beds, and our budget is $25 million. You do the math, it's $500,000 a year per kid. And we need to close one of those facilities and have them operating out of another one. Part of our responsibility in government is making sure that your tax money is spent wisely. And everybody knows what they want money for, but you also have to make the tough fight sometimes to determine when we've spent too much money on something and need to reverse course and free that money up to do something that's more important.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Marsden, for joining us on Mason Cable Network. I really appreciate it, and we're hoping that students will view this and soak it all in and realize the importance of the work that you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. Get out and vote. There are people around the rest of this world who would crawl across broken glass to be able to have the right that you have to choose who leads you at the local, state, and federal level. Never take it for granted. Get out and vote.